मुच्चन्ति देवाः शृण्वन्तं न स्वप्नाय स्पृहयन्ति.
Swadeshi perspectives on Aryan theories. That's the topic. So what I would like is, in the hall we have 3 experts, and on Skype we have 2 more. So Dr. Chaubey, could you go first and tell us?
Okay, my namaste to everybody. I'm very happy to be here to connect with all the people. So can you all hear me properly?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. So last 10 years I was in Estonian Biocenter, and then moving between Cambridge and Sanger Institute. And my interest is mainly with the South Asia and Southeast Asia. I try to see how the population had mixed together, and then if they move from one territory to another territory, how the local environment affects them, and also the timing of if two population had mixed together. So the timing of admixture we try to calculate with the modern technology, which is based on DNA analysis. And now recently in October I moved to BHU, joined as a full professor. So my next working will be mostly on the ancient DNA of India, where we are trying to prove the same thing which we have been able to prove with the modern DNA. So the thing is like this problem is more, I would say that more political than on the level of genetics or level of archaeology or any discipline of science. And if we see the mitochondrial DNA, Y chromosome and autosomes, which each and every person has in their genome, there is no evidence of any recent migration which is coming to India. So my status is the same, that the mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome of population living in India, either they are caste or tribal population, they are having the similar kind of genetic structure and has not been modified or influenced by the migration either from east or west.
Thank you, Dr. Chaubey. This is wonderful. So I would like to invite Dr. Priyadarshi to please give your opening statement, your introduction and opening statement in 5 minutes, please. Thank you.
My name is Priyadarshi. I did MBBS and MD from Patna and MRCP from UK. Currently, I am working in Carlisle in the North Cumbria University Hospital. I have been studying this topic and all its ramifications, all its things like linguistics and genetics and everything. And I have found that basic problem is that most of the people have tried to manipulate the data. Like one group of scholars claim that the lactase persistent gene which digests milk, it came to India from Europe 5,000 BC, and it was published in a scientific journal. They cited Meadows' date as, for Malhotra as 7,000 YBT, but Meadows had said only 7,000 BC. In this way, manipulations are done in all the results and the conclusions are initiated. In another study, a group of the scholars found that the white gene of India and Europe is exactly the same, and they claimed that this proves that white color gene came from Europe to India. Now later the study by Chang, he proved that the white color gene originated in India, and from India it migrated to Europe. So I am basically dissecting all the nonsense done in this field and examining them and bringing out the truth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Talageri ji, you are next.
Well, I would like to point out at the very beginning that this whole, is it working? Hello? Yes. Yeah, this whole question of Aryans is a linguistic issue. I know many people, especially on our side, refuse to accept this fact and say linguistics is not the main issue. But the whole thing started when the Europeans came to India and they saw that the languages of North India were closely related to their own languages. Now, after that, started the study of linguistics. And the result is that all the languages of the world have been divided into 19 language families. Of those, 6 are found in India. Working? Yeah. Out of those 19, 6 are found in India. They are Aryan or Indo-European, Dravidian, Austric, Andamanese, Burushaski, and Sino-Tibetan. So 6 languages are found in India. Of these, Sino-Tibetan is found only in the Himalayas and the Northeast. Andamanese is found in the Andaman Islands. And Burushaski is found in Pak-occupied Kashmir. The main one found all over India, most of India, is the Aryan or Indo-European family. In the south, we have the Dravidian family, and in the east, Central East, Orissa and all that, we find the tribal languages belong to the Munda family. Now, many people dispute that this is so. But linguistically, this is an established fact. Now, as Rajiv ji pointed out, now there are theories that the Dravidians and the Aryans both came from outside. However, the difference between the two things is that there are no Dravidian languages spoken outside India. So they cannot take this theory further. However, in the case of Aryan languages, you find Aryan languages spoken in Europe, Iran, and Central Asia. So then the question arises, where did these languages originate? Did they originate in India or in Central Asia or Europe or somewhere in between? Now, the theory that they have arrived at is that it originated in South Russia and spread from there everywhere. And simply because of this theory, there is nothing in India which says that Aryans came from outside. But because they decided that South Russia was the original land, so they decided that the Aryans came into India from outside. Now, this same logic is not applied, for example, to England, that the English language came to England from South Russia, so there were Aryan invaders in England. That only in the case of India it is applied. Now, there are 3 main fields of arguments. They are linguistics, archaeology, and textual analysis of the Rig Veda. Now, in my books, I have examined all these 3, and I have proved completely that it is the opposite, that Aryans went out from India to the rest of the world. Now, now genetics has been brought into the question, but genetics has really nothing to do with it, because languages do not move along with genetics. For example, Buddhism went from India to China, Japan, and other places, but Indian genes didn't go along with that. Chess went from India to different parts of Asia, but Indian genes didn't go along with that. So language spread cannot be checked by seeing the flow of genes. So basically, this is the major the issue, that it is a linguistic question, and this has been already answered. Now, if anyone has any specific questions, later I can answer that.
So I would like to invite Shri Shiv Shastry ji, please.
Hello. My name is Dr. Shiv Shastry. I'm a surgeon by profession, but my interest in Indology came from my reading of Professor S.N. Balagangadhara, Aurobindo, and Rajiv Malhotra ji's works. Now, as far as this Aryan Invasion migration theory is concerned, I can offer arguments on any field, be it linguistics, archaeology. I can give you evidence on everything because I've been working on this, but I'm going to stick to the following comments. I do agree with Talageri ji to the extent that we need to remember one thing. For Europeans, language meant nation. And because language meant nation, when they found Sanskrit, Sanskrit made them understand the connections between European languages, and they wanted to grab Sanskrit. So this whole business of Aryan was a complete invention to say that this language is ours. We white Aryans came to India. That's one thing. But these so-called Aryans who came to India and were speaking, in those days they were called Indo-Aryan languages. Unfortunately, they were all black, all Kalus. So they had to find some reason why these fellows became black. And they found this convenient set of people. They invented this Dravidian race. These fellows are black, they are non-Christian, they speak some language which we cannot understand. So Dravidians. So there is evidence of this. I have evidence, but that's a separate thing. So I'd like to point out that forget this. There was never any Aryans. Stop saying Aryans came. There were never any Dravidians. Stop saying Dravidians did this, Dravidians did that. We need to get that out of our minds first. And then talk about what is it about the language that started these racist theories and what is the truth. I can speak for 3 to 4 hours on this subject. I'll stop here.
And finally, Nilesh Okji, please, your turn.
All right. As most of you know, I have talked a lot about AIT, so I'll not take even 5 minutes in this round. But something that I want to share that connects the genetics and Indology, the AIT theories. What happens is there are many papers that have already been published on genetics, and many more paper keeps on coming. And so we also have a geneticist here, but also Priyadarshi has done a lot of work. And what you find, anytime you find a paper on genetics, and just right off the bat, if they just jump to the conclusion, and if they are making a case for Aryan invasion theory, jump to the references of that article and start looking for those references which are not genetic in nature, and when they start quoting the Indologist. And that is usually the case, where the genetic component of the research is usually not bad, but then it is interpreted in the context of the old existing AIT theories of Indology. And that's where the whole story goes downhill. So that is something to watch for. That's my experience, and that's what I'm studying these days.
Thank you. I just want to add a little bit to this. There's a section summarizing something in the book Breaking India. The early position of Europeans was that Indians, Sanskrit-speaking Indians, producers of the Vedic culture and so on, are their ancestors. In fact, the very first was that we Indians came here. This was in the beginning. The issue was then, okay, how can we also be Christian? Because that's a Semitic thing that came from the Middle East. How can we have Indian ethnicity, Indian linguistics and Shastra? If our ancestors produced all this Vedic Shastra, when they started reconciling with biblical, they could not reconcile the Shastra, the philosophical dimension. So are we this side or that side? How can we be both? Because we want to be Christian, and yet we want to own this beautiful language and beautiful literature. So how do we reconcile? This was a very big debate. There's a book called The Language of Paradise, where the debate was, okay, in the biblical paradise, were they speaking Hebrew? Were they speaking Sanskrit? What were they speaking? What was the language spoken in? What does Jesus speak? What does God speak? What do they speak in heaven? This is a very big debate in Europe for a long time. So this reconciliation, it was nothing to do with hating India or Indians. It was an internal thing among them, different camps trying to sort it out. And then this idea of how do we remain both, how do we own these things, had to be reconciled, and then evolved another theory, variations of this, that we got the Sanskrit and the stuff from India, but a lot of these texts we have to disown. We like the Sanskrit language, but we cannot accept the religion, because we want the Sanskrit as a language of our ancestors, but we want Christianity as the religion. So there were many ways of figuring out how people must have moved around to fit this requirement. And then after this came this idea that actually we must have taken this language there. We must have taken this language there. And then there were theories, okay, then how did the Vedas come? Okay, if our ancestors produced the Vedas, then we have got Vedic heritage and not Christian heritage. So there's many of this. And then there was this idea that the language is ours, but these guys, when they got this, when the Indians took it, they did not fully understand it. They turned it into caste system because the Aryans didn't want to marry the local people, so they wanted to remain separate. They wanted to have a separate caste, and they started classifying other people into different camps and make them into separate castes. So this apartheid in India was because our European ancestors went there, wanted to remain separate, and this mixture turned into the caste system in India. And according to this theory, the Brahmins They don't want to own that the Brahmins are their ancestors, because how do you accuse them? So Brahmins are the mixed people. The Aryans went and married the natives, intermingled blood, and these mixed up people were the Brahmins, who were kind of, then we can blame them because they are all mixed up people. So on the one hand, we are ancestors of that civilization, the Vedic civilization in India. On the other hand, all the wrong things we can disown because those things happened over there only. This how evolution of this idea over 50 years, from the late 1700s till middle of 1800s, was happening. And every major European university, Germany, France, England especially, started a Sanskrit department. Sanskrit became an important language. There's a book that came out of a conference on the early 1800s, early to mid, the rise of Sanskrit studies in Europe. Of course, after they had done a lot of data mining, all the Patanjali stuff turned into computation, turned into linguistics and all that stuff in those days. It was not computational linguistics, but turned into the study of linguistics. And many other things derived. Comparative philosophy came, so many other ideas that they got out of it. Then later on, by the end of 1800s, early 1900s, there was a decline in Sanskrit studies in the West. So there is a whole European politics driving this. Much later came this, what the missionaries want to do and how they want to divide up with Aryan, Dravidian, and Bishop Caldwell want to Dravidianize, and all that is sort of like mid to late 1800s. So the original Aryan theory also has a lot to do with Germany wanting to build a nation, Germany wanting to create a national identity. France would teach its children in schools that we are the inheritors of the Renaissance, the great Renaissance, the French Renaissance. The whole Latin culture, they are the inheritors of that. So they had a grand narrative for the French to celebrate themselves and their identity. And the British had the empire, and they were the originators of democracy and all of that. Germans didn't have a sense of grand narrative. They were considered the barbarians. In Europe, they were considered the barbarians. So this is part of the German nation building, but the language is closest to Sanskrit. So this idea that our grand narrative is actually the great Sanskrit tradition, was a very big boost for their nation building. So these are rivalries within Europe, wanting to build these kind of narratives against each other, their own superiority. It is much later that the issue was turned into how to use this as a weapon in India. The British, once the Germans had adopted this Aryan identity as sort of the people who brought it to India and all that, the Aryanization, then the British started also, the East India Company at the time, and later the British monarchy, they all propagated this idea that one way of justifying colonial rule is that, our ancestors had gone there long ago. So we're just going back. This is like the second Aryan invasion. First, the British invasion is the second Aryan invasion. The first one happened long ago, and we brought a lot of good things. We brought them, Sanskrit and Vedas, and now we're bringing them English language, democracy, and cricket, and all those things, good things, So it fit the needs, political and identity needs of especially these three European countries, the French, the Germans, and the English. And there was also Indology in other parts of Europe. People don't realize that there was Indology also in Russia. There was Indology in many other countries. And so I'll stop with that as sort of just another perspective. Yeah, please.
If I may say something, it's absolutely true that the Germans took this up, but we must not mistake this and think that the others were not guilty. I have references, including a book lying in my bookshelf, English book published in England by English so-called scholars and linguists. So there are lots of English references that asserted that Sanskrit, the Aryans of Europe, went to India and they got corrupted by the black Colerio-Dravidians. So there are lots of English references as well. They were very much inside it. And somehow I think, we have got, what has happened is, after World War II, the British have disowned this Aryan business. You know, if all Indo-Aryan languages, they started calling them Indo-European languages after World War II. And this is, we got nothing to do with Aryans, the Germans. It's not true. The British are complicit in this, and so are the French. So we need to remember that they're all in it together. Let's not be fooled by thinking that it's only the Germans.
Yeah, well, Max Muller was working for the East India Company. He, German, but he was working, he's hired, funded, paid by the East India Company. He was an East India Company, commissioned his 50 volumes or so on the works of India being translated. He'd never come to India. So he was translating from Sanskrit using a dictionary. So that origin of Aryans credited to him, and Bishop Caldwell, on whom there's a big statue here in Chennai somewhere. There's some big, huge statue on Bishop Caldwell. He started this Dravidian theory. They're all British people. So, of course, we know that that's the case. So, there's an internal rivalry is what I'm saying, and then there's external projection that is going on.
Well, there are a couple of questions here which I would like to address. One says, it was asked in the previous session, one of the points put forward by AIT proponents is that the arrival of the horse within India. It is said that the Aryans brought the horse to India. Your comments? Yeah, that's a nice story. I have 2 or 3 comments on this. I think the first thing to remember is, apart from the fact that somebody pointed out that horse bones have been found in Surkotada, they have found camel bones as well. Now, there are 2 types of camels. There's the Arabian camel and there's the Bactrian camel. And you know, Bactria is the same as bulk, which has a... So did we find, you know, we seem to have connections with Bactria. Did we find Bactrian camel bones? No. We found Arabian camel bones. Now, this great horse that we are supposed to have got from somewhere, Equus caballus, has 36 ribs. There is one sukta in the Rig Veda that mentions the number of ribs in the horse as 34. Have they made a mistake? No. The Arabian horse has 34 ribs. So this entire claim that the horse came from Eurasia is horse manure. There's a couple of other things I need to find out. I think when you talk about horse and horse bones, you need to understand how do you... See, here in India there's a language, there's the Rig Veda. It's all text. There's no horse evidence, there's no horse bone evidence. Let's accept that. But over there in Europe, there's no language. You don't know what language, it could have been any language. So how did they make a connection between some archaeology in Europe and the Rig Veda? I can answer that, but I'm supposed to be talking about it tomorrow, and you know, I'll just leave it at that. Please, I can talk about it in detail in the time I've been given tomorrow. The second question is, November 17 paper in Nature says that during the times of Indus cities, no river of Himalayan glacier's origin flowed there. Doesn't it go against AIT opponents' theories of Saraswati River? I'd like to point out that the last ice age ended about 10,000 years ago. Then when the last ice age ended, there was a period of very heavy rainfall in India for 4,000 years, up to 6,000 BC. Now, there are a lot of studies in fact, there's a 2017 study that shows that the sediments of the Ghaggar-Hakra river have reached the Arabian Sea. So there was definitely a river that was flowing from where the Ghaggar-Hakra is into the Arabian Sea during this period from 10,000 BC to 6,000 BC. Now, why I mention this particular period is this is the period where aridity started in Rajasthan. There was a lot more rainfall, yes, but aridity started in Rajasthan. So the point is, this Himalayan river or no Himalayan river, if there is rainfall, you get big lakes and you get big rivers as well. So it was most likely a rain-fed river. I hope that answers the question.
So, Dr. Chaubey, do you have anything further to add or to this whole horse issue, or the 2 gentlemen, or Priyadarshi ji? Because you are far away, I want to make sure you're not sort of marginalized. So tell me, either of you.
Yeah, I would like to add a few more things in the debate, that there are migrations from both of the sides, but when it comes relates with some major migration which happens 3,500 years ago or 4,000 years ago. That's a big question, and that is not yet had been reported by any group. Either they support Aryan invasion or they don't support Aryan invasion. There is no convincing evidence which does it. But because there is a way to move to Europe, and there is a way to move back from Europe. If you see the Jews' migration to India, which is very well known, we can clearly see the signals. And also the Parsis, we can clearly see the signals. Also the Gypsies who moved out of India, the signals are very clear, and which has happened in last few thousand years ago. And also some migrations related with haplogroup U7 and related with the Iranians. There are Indian groups which are still can be detected very clearly, and Indian haplogroups which could be very easily can be found in Iran, and some Iranian groups as well can be detected in India. But the main question relates with Aryan is really disputed, and some of the ancient DNA we needed, because when they said that there is a mitochondrial DNA migration, then we showed that largely 90 to 95% Indians, they have the same mitochondrial DNA which has originated, which has a root in last 40 to 50,000 years ago. Then they moved to Y chromosome, saying that, okay, this migration was related with the males only. Then we again looked at the Y chromosome and said that no, there is no such thing in Y chromosome as well. So now they are asking that probably because there is no ancient DNA evidence from India, so probably the ancient DNA evidence says that there was Aryan migration. So we are working on the ancient DNA samples, which is like from Talageri, 4,000 years older, and it can tell you that the preliminary result clearly shows that even there was a Dravidian expansion towards the northwest India, which was so far not reported, but there was there's no migration from the west to east. So this was the final conclusions.
So are you aware, is there any evidence of outward migration of DNA from India out to Europe?
Yes, there is migration from, because if you see the Iranian and some European groups in mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome, for example, the haplogroup H, which has a very good structure in India, and that relates with like 40 to 50,000 years. And we have found there is a population called Kurumba in South India. Two individuals from the same population, they are sharing a most common ancestor, which is 45,000 years older, which is very remarkable, because in a similar population, these two individuals, they are existing since 45,000 years, which we cannot see anywhere in the world. So it means that these populations are existing since nobody knows the time, and there is no any intrusion of any male side or female side. And the same haplogroup H is found very clearly in Armenia, and they are rooting out from the Indian roots, not from any African root or any Iranian root. They are clearly rooting out. So if you see the structure of Y chromosome or mitochondrial DNA, we see on the base there is Indians, which is having like north, south, and central Indian population. Then there is a branch, which is a deep branch and with a long length, and then giving rise to the smaller branches which are present in Iran, present in Armenia, present in Azerbaijan, and also some Central Asian population. But there is also the same thing, that there is no large-scale migration from India to, we don't see any such kind of signal that there are millions of people who just migrated out of India.
Now the debates, there are multiple debates that sometimes get collapsed as one, but one should look at them as separate debates. So there's a debate on DNA of Indian people, its relationship between the North and the South Indian, and that's a debate. And then its relationship with Europeans to see if they will flow in one direction or the other. That's a kind of a racial origins debate. Then there's a second debate on language. And the two are not, I've always found it very problematic that people think that if genetically people came in a direction, then language also came. Because, you can export a language with a few people who go and teach a lot of people. You can export, programming languages, you can export ideas, philosophies, and so on. So since there was sea trade, philosophers would go on ships to Greece and the Middle East and China, and they would, the trade of ideas is independent of the trade of DNA. So the second set of debates has to do with origin of languages and flow of languages, which is a very interesting topic. Then there's a third one, which is the Shastras, the texts, the knowledge in the language. You can have a language go from X, starts in place X and goes to place Y, and then the people in Y compose a lot of texts and do a lot of work in it. So a lot of people in India are producing English works. So if at one point in time, the output of English in India, from India is more than the output of English in England, then 1,000 years from now, you will not be, people might think that, English must have gone from India to England because we produce more text. So, so you have three issues. One is race, one is language, and the other is Vedic civilization. Then there's a fourth issue, which is what does all this relate to the Harappan, Indus, Saraswati civilization, physical. That is physical evidence is always the final. So that those guys have got tiles, they got some letters, they need to be decoded. We have Kalyan Raman here who's done some pioneering work. We have amazing seaports, a lot of water systems and so on, irrigation and very sophisticated civilization. And so the question is, how does that civilization relate to the debate on race, the debate on language, and the debate on Vedas? What would be the relationship? So these are four different debates. And I think to put all the moving parts, all the permutations together and have a coherent theory would be kind of a challenge. So would you like to comment on this? Because you introduced another dimension, which is astronomical data. So why don't you speak on that?
Okay, so as we talked, there are two sides to it. So two sides in the sense of the constructive side and a destructive side. So what I consider, because the AIT proponents started with linguistics or like to talk more about linguistics, then they grabbed archaeology. When it backfired, they gave up archaeology, and then the invasion became a migration theory. And now the latest thing is genetics. And so that's one aspect of it. And where I tend to focus, and it wasn't by design, I was just doing for a different reason, but it fits well into this AIT debate, is the constructive side, which is to establish the ancient nature of our civilization. And so I started with astronomy evidence, and tomorrow I'm going to get more detail into the river Saraswati evidence, and then also the Dwarka evidence. So for example, the flooding and destruction of Dwarka. I mean, so there is that one particular date that I came from astronomy, but then people started asking, astronomy, that's fine, what about other disciplines of science? And actually, I'll share with you in detail tomorrow, but there are many other disciplines. So obviously, the whole entire river Saraswati evidence, but then the oceanography evidence, then seismology evidence, and all of that points to this ancient nature of Indian civilization. So that by itself can counter this very argument of AIT, but specifically its timing.
So for those of you who are new to this debate, the astronomical evidence is very interesting because in Indian texts, in Indian tradition, doing a horoscope of a person or doing on a very important occasion, like somebody is getting married or somebody is having a baby, some king is born, or some big coronation, some major historical event in the life of important people, it's a tradition to map out the sky. So the sky is like a clock. It's like a huge cosmic clock. And so like the ordinary clock goes around every 12 hours, this clock goes around thousands of years. So some of the texts, some of the ancient Indian texts have astronomical markings very clearly defined, and this had to be done very accurately. This is not something that the Pandits are not allowed to fool around. It's a very precise mapping of the sky. So they have a photograph of the sky, what it looked like on various events, important milestones in the lives of important people in our texts. So now you can simulate, there is software where you put in the map of the sky and it will tell you exact date when the sky looked like that. So this is another time clock which has been, so we didn't have people writing the Western style history and saying this is this date necessarily, but they would write it in a different way saying this is the shape of the map of the sky, which is kind of a clock also. So you could say we did have dating, but it was dating in the sense of astronomical dating. And Nilesh's work is very important in using this astronomical dating to come up with when people might have migrated and when they, and you can also tell from what location they were looking.
Can I add something to it? So astronomy evidence, quickly to give you the landscape. So we'll take two epics. In case of Mahabharata, there are more than 130 different claims. And most of, 60% of them, so use astronomy evidence. So a lot of questions came in. So how come if everyone is using the same astronomy evidence that leads to many different claims? The answer is 99% of the Mahabharata researchers who are claiming that they're using astronomy evidence, they are not using all the astronomy evidence. They are using arbitrary or selective set of evidence, which most cases seem to fit their claim, their date. Okay, so that's the issue. It is easy, it's relatively easy to solve this. And to quickly answer, quickly make another point, which is the astronomy evidence has to be separated into two categories. There is certain evidence, certain type of evidence, which does not repeat very frequently. It takes more than 26,000 years before it happens again. Whereas there is another set of evidence that will repeat every month, every year, and so on. And so majority of these researchers simply have not looked at this long-term evidence. That is true for Mahabharata, that is true for Ramayana.
If Dravidian language family is different and originated separately from Indo-European languages such as Sanskrit, how come many Dravidian languages have so many Sanskrit words in them? Moreover, where did these two groups started their separate culture? Okay, you can have languages borrow words from each other. That doesn't mean that they originated together. I mean, in English you have now aloo paratha, and that doesn't mean that the British came up with aloo paratha. And we have pizza, and that doesn't mean that we started the pizza as part of the Hindi language. So these are called loan words. That it really doesn't help. I know it's very popular for people to say 40% of this language is like that and 60% of it is like that. Words travel always, even today. I'm sure Tamil is taking a lot of English words and for various things, computer and iPhone and all that, and so is in Hindi, and Americans are taking a lot of our words. So that is not going to solve the problem. The fact that there are a lot of loan words is really not that conclusive. Yeah. It is said that there is no difference between DNAs of Indians, including tribals. Is there any different genes of, this is for Dr. Chaubey, is there any difference in genes or Indians and European genes, Chinese, Japanese, Africans? So Dr. Chaubey?
Yeah, there is a huge difference between all these groups, but so far we know that we all derive from Africa. There was a group who migrated out of Africa. Then some of them remained in India, some of them went to Europe, some of them went to Southeast Asia, East Asia, and Oceania. So that's like a very earlier migration happened 50 to 70,000 years ago. But second thing is about a question which a few minutes ago Sri Malhotra ji raised, and he said that the difference between Dravidian and the difference between Indo-European speakers of India. So the situation is because the reason is not like because we are mixed with somebody else. The reason is because we follow endogamy since several thousand years. So if a population living in North India and just intermarrying within North India, within a couple of thousand years ago, it will show a completely different profile than a population living in South India practicing the same. So the situation here is, if you compare a European population with Indian, then all the Indian, they will form a own cluster. So the difference between European, East Asian with Indian is very, very clear cut. But if you compare a North and South Indian population, then they will be also different because of the endogamy practices and because of the long-term isolation between these two populations. So we should not compare two different groups who are living separately from one place to another place. But
okay, so while we are fixing the technology, so Talageri ji, I put a question there. Could you answer that question? Read out the question first.
Yeah. Yaskacharya and his school of Nairukta do not believe in history in the Vedas. This school and scholars are in majority. Yaskacharya himself has mentioned in Nirukta that there are Nairukta school and scholars who believe history in the Vedas. From your own writing, you believe in history in the Vedas. What is your opinion on history versus non-history in the Vedas? Now, this is a very general question. It's like a Christian coming and asking me, see, the Bible says Jesus is the Son of God. What do you have to say? Can I convince him? I mean, religious beliefs you cannot answer. I have no answer to this. If he believes there is no history in the Vedas, there is history in the Vedas. Every sukta mentions the name of the rishi, and they are related to each other. One is by Vishwamitra, one is by his son, one is by his grandson. Then within the hymns, they mention the battles. The Dasharatnya battle is described in the suktas. Then there are kings, the rishis mention that this king gave me 10,000 cows. These are all things which are there in this thing. Now, if your religious beliefs make you believe that there is no history in the Vedas, I cannot convince you. There is no answer to this.
Here's a question, says, where in India did Sanskrit originate? Did Sanskrit flow from north to south within India? If so, is there ancient Vedic culture, civilization different from what we call Dravidian culture? Many people say that the two are clearly distinct. In the previous panel, I was in the very first panel. We had Dr. Nagaswamy, we had others. Basically, and Dr. Nagaswamy's talk was on this only. He took some very old classical Tamil texts, and he showed that while the language is very distinct, the ideas match the Dharma Shastra, the Arth Shastra, the Nata Shastra, the Kam Shastra. So the ideas are very common, and this is a point that archaeologists have also made, art historians have also made, that you cannot really say there's a distinct civilization just because there's a distinct language. So here is some more. With such conclusive evidence against AIT, AMT, why is it still taught? When can we expect to it be stopped in schools? Now that's a question you should ask the HRD ministry, because I'm asking them all the time. I don't get an answer. So when will they stop teaching all this stuff in schools? It's not only in schools. The UPSC exam is based on this kind of stuff. It's all the Romila Thapar, this kind of view. Those are the authors that you have to read, required reading. I did a 1-hour analysis on my video show of the UPSC exam, which for you people would know, is a civil service entrance exam for the government of India, and what all they are, how colonized it is in terms of what they're expecting you to know. So we have not really done much as a nation to fix the colonized education system. That is all I can tell you, and I wish I had a happier answer to give you. So here it is. Western scholars have many theories regarding our culture, ways, history, and greatness. Why not have a standardized, responsible, government-approved text? So they're talking the same thing. I mean, this is a good question for HRD minister to answer. I cannot say why the government not doing its job. Tectonic evidence. Now, this may be something for you. India, Australia, Africa, etc. were landlocked and separated in tectonic movement. Land moved, not people. Is that relevant, or is that millions of years ago? I mean, that's before there were human beings. So you have to be, the continents being connected and then separated out is millions of years ago. We are talking a few thousand years, so they're not related issue. Yeah, I think we should not mix them up.
Is there any genetic research on the similarities between New Zealanders, the Australian Aboriginals, Red Indians, Mayans, and Indians? So I mean, Chaubey is frozen. So I'll say it's not even relevant. Okay. But it's not, well, let's say it's not relevant, and actually you find the percentage, across the world, like certain percentage, they keep on changing. So yes, you find some similarities, that is true. I mean, the Indian gene you can find in some of the native Indians of North America, but it's not relevant. There is one interesting question that came to me, and although it said, the question to me, but I would want Shrikant Talageri to answer that. I mean, he has already answered it. The question is, one of the features of AIT demonstrated was the time range, the 2000 BC and 1500 BC importance. What stops them, the proponents of this AIT theory, to revise it to another timeline? So why they cannot go before 2000 BC, why they cannot go after 1500?
See, there is a reason. Now, suppose you find a book which mentions Mahatma Gandhi, and someone tells you this book was written in 1700 AD. Would you believe it? Because we know that he lived in this century. So anything which mentions something which is of an earlier time cannot, of a later time, I mean, cannot be belong to that time. Now, what happens is that all the Indo-European languages, the languages of Europe and North India and Iran and Central Asia, they have many words in common. And some of them are technological words which were invented at a certain point of time. For example, wheeled carts came into being around 3000 BC. Now, all these languages have common words like cycle, chakra, etc. are related to each other, the words. So all these languages have common words which show that they were together. There are 12 branches of Aryan languages. And the common words show that they were together when the wheels were invented. Wheeled carts were invented around 3000 BC. And in India, we have recorded evidence only from the time of Ashoka and the Buddha, which can be read. We have the Indus inscriptions which have not yet been read. So we have 600 BC when we know that there were Aryans in India. And before that is the Vedic literature, which goes back at least another, at the minimum dates given by Max Miller, it goes back at least 600, 700 years. Now, Max Miller tried to crush it as much as possible, because their theory is that after 3000 BC, all the 12 Aryan branches were in South Russia. Then they started spreading. And two branches, the Indo-Aryan or Vedic branch and the Iranian branch, came from South Russia to Central Asia. There they settled down for a long time. Then they split into two groups. One group came to the present-day Pakistan area, that is Punjab, Greater Punjab area. And there they composed the Rig Veda. And the other group went to Afghanistan, where they composed the Zend Avesta, the oldest Iranian text. Now, and after that, between the Rig Veda and the age of the Buddha, you cannot condense everything into 200, 300 years. Nevertheless, Max Miller managed to condense it into 600 years. Because that full journey from South Russia to Central Asia, staying there, then coming here, and in the Rig Veda, there is no memory of any external contacts. So, because they could not have the Aryans leaving South Russia before 3000 BC. And they could not have them coming into India after 1200 BC. Also because, the Iron Age starts somewhere in the second half of the second millennium BC, after 1500 BC. And the Rig Veda still does not mention iron. So because of all these constraints, they had to push the date somewhere between 3000 and, somewhere in fact between 2000 and 1500 BC for them entering Central Asia, and for them entering India from 1500 to 1200 BC. So it is because of these things that the constraints are there. Means actual datable scientific inventions like the wheels. And there is another one, the spoked wheel. Now the spoked wheels were invented in 2200 BC. There were no spoked wheels before that. After that, these chariots started moving fast and everything. Now, these wheels, the Rig Veda contains 10 books, 5 of which are old books and 5 of which are new books. Now, what the Western scholars claim is that the Rig Veda mentions spoked wheels. So the Rig Veda is dated after 2000 BC. However, the spoked wheels are found only in the 5 new books. They are not found in the 5 old books. So that proves that the 5 old books go long before 2200 BC, 3000 and further beyond. I will not go into exactly how early, because Nilesh ji may have some different views, but definitely they go back long before 2500 BC on the basis of these technological dates, which they are not willing to accept. Because I was the one who brought this point out. There was a internet debate going on about spoked wheels, in which they were saying that spoked wheels are mentioned in the Rig Veda, and that proves that the Rig Veda is after 2000. But then I pointed out that as per their own classification and my classification also, 5 of the mandalas are old mandalas and 5 are new mandalas. And these books, spoked wheels are mentioned only in the new mandalas. So that proves that the old mandalas go long before the invention of spoked wheels.
Thank you. So to close, before I close, I've invited Dr. Kalyan Raman, who's an original thinker of the related issue. The Indus Saraswati seals, have not been decoded in the sense of a consensus accepting it, but a pioneering work has been done by him. Many books have been written by him on the subject. And he has a very innovative original theory that this is not sort of a spoken ordinary common language, but a language for manufacturing and trade of metallurgy and so on. And I find it very intriguing and very kind of a novel idea. Can you, for the benefit of the audience, give a very quick summary of your thoughts on this matter?
Thanks a lot, Rajiv. Today, the status of the inscriptions has gone far beyond what Airavata Mahadevan did. When he brought out his book, there were only 2000 inscriptions. Today, there are more than 8,000. Not only in India, not only in the 30-40 sites of India along the Saraswati River basin, we have seals along the Persian Gulf, we have seals along the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, and we have even metallic objects, ingots, with inscriptions of Indus script discovered in a shipwreck in Haifa, Israel. They are of pure tin ingots, each ingot weighing 25 kilograms with symbols of the Indus script. Then we have the same type of Indus script symbols in the Far East, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, Burma. They make what are called Dongsan bronze drums. They are huge drums. On the tympanum and on the body of the bronze drum, they have Indus script, elephant, peacock, frog. They are all readable. Now, there is a very unsolved problem of the Bronze Age. Originally, bronze was arsenical bronze, which was naturally occurring, arsenic plus copper, which they were using it for making some hard metallic objects. That became in short supply. The natural resource of arsenical bronze became in short supply. Now, somebody, some brilliant mind, invented the idea of mixing copper and tin and creating bronze. This created the revolution of Bronze Age. The question unanswered is, where did this tin come from? I can tell you, there are very few places in the world where tin can come from. One is somewhere in Cornwall in England, which is a very small resource. But the largest tin belt of the globe is along 3 Himalayan rivers: Mekong, Irrawaddy, Salween, where these Dongsan bronze drums and Korean bronze drums are made. How is the tin formed? The cassiterite ore, by grinding down the granite rocks. These Himalayan great rivers, 2,500 kilometer long rivers, they ground down the granite rocks and created this cassiterite ore. And this was the source of tin. Who were the intermediaries? The seafaring merchants from India. So the people in the ancient Far East who celebrate the Indian civilization and the culture by creating the Shivalingas. If you go to the Vietnam Museum, you will get 200 Shivalingas. Beautiful structures. But Shivalinga is not like a penis. Shivalinga is made of 3 structures: the Vishnu Bhaga, Rudra Bhaga, and Brahma Bhaga. The Vishnu Bhaga is quadrangular, the Rudra Bhaga is octagonal, 8-angled, and on the top is the cylindrical with a shashala, like a chakra, Vishnu chakra. Where did this idea of the octagonal pillar come in? It comes from a find recently revealed, Rajiv, in a place called Binjore on the Saraswati Valley. It's an archaeological site of the Saraswati civilization or the Indus Valley civilization. In 2015, students from the Indian Archaeological Institute, National Museum, Delhi, led by Sanjay Manjul, excavated that site. That site is only about 7 kilometers from the border of Pakistan, at a place called Anupgarh, where the Saraswati River splits. One channel goes towards the west, another channel goes towards the Jaisalmer area. At that spot, a remarkable, stunning discovery was found, a Yajna-kunda. And in that Yajna-kunda, an octagonal brick was found. A brick. Where does the octagonal brick come in the Yajna-kunda? Rigveda refers to it as Yupa Ketu. Shatapada Brahmana has 200 shlokas describing the octagonal pillar as Astasri Yupa. This is a signature tune for the performance of a Somastamstha Yaga. So now this Binjore evidence is so fantastic that there was some metallic activity that was going on there, and they also found a seal containing the same messages about what they were working on with metals. It appears that these 8,000 seals that have been found in the Persian Gulf area, Tigris Euphrates, and the shipwreck of Haifa in Israel, and the Dongsan bronze drums, all of them relate to catalogs of metalwork. They are catalogs of the competence of the people to create new alloys, make them hard. And what is the chashala supposed to do? The chashala is described in the Shatapada Brahmana as made of wheat chaff. Wheat fumes from the fiery pillar of light, that is the Shivalinga, or the octagonal pillar, Rudrabhaga. They enter into the metal, molten metal, they enter through carbon. The Angaraka is carbon. So another element enters into the alloy system to make it hard. That's how the iron becomes steel. So you have the Zebu, the Brahmani bull, which is the dominant symbol in the Indus Valley civilization. What is that? What is that supposed to be? Pola festival, which celebrates the festival of the animals. Pola is the Zebu bull. And what is Pola? Magnetite ore, ferrite ore. And on top of that bull, a little bird sits on some of the seals. What is that bird? Poladu. Poladu is a black drongo. And Poladu means steel. The Poladu steel which has been found, that name that is found in Persia, in Russia, Croatia, all over Europe. So that means there was a lot of metallurgical activity that was promoted through the intermediation of these people of the Saraswati River Valley, working with metals and alloys. And of course, creating also very beautiful objects, sculptures, using a technique called the Serre Purdue technique. What is the Serre Purdue? Last wax technique. Where is it described? Only in the Indian literature. Where there are old texts, Rasaratna Samchaya, which describes how the Serre Purdue sculpture is made. The same technique is used even today in Swami Malai by the Vishwakarmas, where you take a wax, make it into a mold, and then apply on top of it very fine clay from a riverbed, like Kaveri or Indus, and then allow it to dry up, and on top of it make a hole and pour molten metal. What do you get? Nataraja, Krishna, Rama, bronze statues, Pratima. The same technique is used for the dancing girls of the Mohenjo-daro. And what does that man, the great priest, wear? A shawl, leaving the right shoulder bare, and with beautiful trefoils. He is the Potru of the Rigveda. Potru is a purifier. He is a smelter. So that's the story. Thank you.
So, in closing, I want to say that we received an inquiry from a statement of interest from the National Museum in Delhi that Infinity Foundation and they should do a joint conference on Saraswati River. So we are going to do it next year, and we hope all of you will join us. Thank you very much for attending the panel. Thank you.